Hello, we've got a special Paddock Pass podcast this week because we are going to be talking to one of the renowned and most prominent figures in the MotoGP paddock, or I should say that Dave is going to be. And with all this talk around Deep Seek being very much the fad and the US and China going to war over another new topic, just to ensure that this podcast is not fake, Dave, could I interest you in a cappuccino?
Yeah. Oh, yes, please. I would love a milky coffee. And could you serve me some tiramisu with that?
AI's taking over.
Oh dear, we've been rumbled. But no, yes, all systems normal. And like we said, we do have a pretty special podcast this morning. We're recording on a Tuesday. It's going to be released on a Wednesday. And we're in the middle of the current sort of bevy of team launches for 2025. KTM coming up this week. We've also got the Japanese teams, Yamaha and Honda, of course, on the eve of the Sepang test. And Dave already getting excited to pack his bags, lodge his hat into the locker above of his flight and take off to Malaysia for 4 days, Dave? Are you going to be there for 4 or 5?
A week.
A week, goodness gracious.
A week, because the flights on the Friday and the Saturday nights were about €400 more expensive than the flight on the Sunday night, and an extra night of hotel is something like €60. So that was a no-brainer.
I guess the food as well is also not going to be stretching the bank balance. So
no, exactly, and the food is the food is very good. It's you can. I do like going to Malaysia. It's a lovely place.
You're just going to need to wrap up against the Arctic air conditioning temperatures in the Sepang International Circuit media room, and you'll be fine.
Exactly.
You'll be in this exact same get-up sat in Sepang, Dave, with your...
Yeah, exactly. I'm taking my winter fleece with me for the minus 27. They've set the the media centre to.
And that growl, of course, is Neil Morrison. Neil, are you feeling slightly nervous about Champions League football today?
I think there's Champions League football tomorrow, actually, but yeah, otherwise pretty good. Definitely get the feeling that we're back into a bit of a rhythm. January is always a bit of a strange one. The slow start, you always feel like you should be doing something, but there's maybe not always a great deal to do. And now we're in the midst of these team launches. I mean, that must mean the testing's around the corner.
Isn't there Champions League football every
night,
day, every second of every year?
More or less, Dave. Yeah. You're not far wrong there, I'd say.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just trying to juggle timeframes here because we are recording on a Tuesday, but people will be listening on a Wednesday. So it will be the build-up to Liverpool being all conquering on the European front again.
We're going over this whole where we are coming live from bloody Jerez again, aren't we?
That's right. Our listeners will know well that we're always live. So don't forget. Guys, just before we move on to topics, and of course the fantastic interview with Lin Jarvis, we'll get Dave to talk a little bit about that and some of the context around it in a moment. The VR46 team was presented, and thoughts on the livery? Dave, you first.
Yes, well, it's going to be easy to spot.
That's it. Nice succinct judgment. Is that a bit? Not a great deal of variation on last year. It's more white, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's whiter, and I think that. I mean, I sort of like the yellow. I quite like. I think it is quite bright, but sort of like the yellow and white, I'm not a big fan of. I don't quite know why they've gone for that particular colour scheme. It's going to be interesting to see what Fabio Di Gianantonio and Franco Morbidelli can do, and it really does seem like this really is Frankie's put up or shut up year.
Neil, our good friend, Good Egg, Pete McLaren was, covering all the debriefs on the launch. And by the way, team launches on a weekend. I get it. If people want to appeal to the fans, people may be kicking back on the sofa, not doing anything on a working day. But for journalists who already work enough weekends, especially 22 Grand Prix this year, they can fuck right off. I mean, we don't really need to be having team launches on a weekend. So, I don't think I can be any kind of clearer of my opinion. But, Neil, just from some of the stuff that Pete sent through to us, Didier, is he looking up to speed? Is he going to be fit for the tests? Did you have a look through the transcripts?
it looks like he is not going to be 100% fit, but I think the date which he chose for his surgery at the end of last year was to have the first race in mind, and the goal was to be 100% fit for the first race in Thailand. So yeah, I think he's going to take a little bit of time to bed in preseason testing, but I think he's fairly confident that the recovery should be at close to 100% for the start of March or the end of February, whatever the first race of the season is on. So yeah, I think Digi was sounding fairly confident, and yeah, Franco as well, unsurprisingly.
I'd just like to say that, I'm really happy. I really appreciate that Fabio Di Giannantonio made the right decision about this, because so often you see riders just carry on, try to force through, finish out the season, then end up not being fit in time, making the wrong decisions for short term, for very short term considerations. And I think this was really, really smart for De Gia to actually miss races, something riders absolutely hate to do, thinking about the long term, thinking about this year, where he actually has a much better chance of performing than last year. So, yeah, hats off to him.
Who has the immediate scrutiny? Is it going to be him? I mean, he has a 2-year deal, but then
no,
Franco
Morbidelli
is in pretty much last chance saloon, right?
Yeah, Morbidelli, because Morbidelli, I mean, we also know that KTM's future is not clear. You'd have to be sort of insane to think that Ducati aren't already talking to Albert Villela, saying, "Look, there's going to be, or there might be a space next year. If you're ever looking for a ride, give us a phone, and I'm sure we can sort something out. Full factory support and all the rest of it." So
Pedro Acosta's manager, you're referring to.
Pedro Acosta's manager, yes, worth pointing out. So I mean, like Morbidelli really has to step up this year if he wants to keep his seat up against Pedro Acosta, and I think that's going to be a tough one for him.
Speaking of surgery, David Alonso, the Moto3 world champion, of course, a Moto2 rookie for 2025, posted a picture on his Instagram saying he had a dislocated right shoulder. It's not a good time for Spaniards and shoulders. Jorge Prado as well in the third round of AMA Supercross also dislocated his shoulder. I think it was the right one as well. It's by the looks of things, it's hard to tell how serious it is at the moment. And we reached out to the CF Moto Aspar team about it. They said that David Alonso is going to be having a scan today, that is Tuesday, to know a little bit more about the full extent of the damage and also what it means for his recovery time. But I don't know, Neil, what's your thoughts heading into like a Moto2 season? It really depends on how bad it is. But then if we remember, Brad Binder had a pretty serious crash in Valencia, broke his arm. But, that didn't really seem to, damage him too much in terms of learning Moto2 and getting up to speed.
Yeah, from what we heard from the CF Moto team, David Alonso might not even have fallen off his bike when he did this shoulder dislocation, which indicates that it was something of a freak accident or a freak incident. It's not great timing really at all, because we do know that the step up from Moto3 into the Moto2 class is a huge one, and all the time you can get on the bikes in preseason testing at Portimao and then at Jerez is obviously crucial. So if Alonso was to miss one or two of those tests, he would be at a massive disadvantage going into the first round of the year. We have seen this in years gone by with riders kind of rookies coming in with big expectations on their shoulders, like Ethan Guevara for one, being injured and really playing catch up then through the year. I think Guevara's injury in that occasion was more related to the fact that he hadn't been training quite as intensely as his team would have liked. I can't imagine that has been the case with David Alonso, but yeah, bad timing. And for someone that may have tipped him to win the Moto2 championship this year, it's not great news.
Question: do we think that this, because this is the worst possible time to actually damage your shoulder, and there's already been talk about David Alonso maybe only doing 1 year in Moto2 before going up to MotoGP? Do we think this stops that, changes that, or am I really getting ahead of myself?
Really getting ahead of yourself, I would say, Dave. Let's draw massive conclusions about his future on the 20th of January.
Has it ever
before he's
really?
28th, come on, give it. It's a week after that, but yes, no, I mean, I do get this, but again, as we were talking about Digia, shoulder injuries always worry me. You can break an arm and an arm will heal. The shoulder is the most complex joint in the body. It's incredibly important, and it's just knitted together with a whole bunch of tendons and sinews and tissue which doesn't heal very well. So if you have done something bad, and also it's interesting that he didn't get thrown off the bike because he's trying to sort of hold it. He's tensing up and holding on, and sometimes that will injure you more or worse than actually falling off.
Yeah, and it's also complicated, Dave, because when you're making that transition from Moto 3 to Moto 2, you're also in the process of putting on a lot of extra muscle, trying to gain weight to bulk up and be physically big enough and strong enough to manhandle the Moto 2 machine around. I think we saw Pedro Acosta commenting after his first year in Moto 2 that he had to go away during the off season and put on, was it 6 kilos, 7 kilos, something close to that, because he felt that he just wasn't strong enough to ride the bike with a full tank of fuel in the opening laps of the race. And no doubt Alonso's been doing a lot of conditioning work over the winter to try and beef up. He is only a tiny guy, so yeah, that further complicates the process when you're trying to do that, as well as just be strong enough to be on the bike.
Just having 1 year in Moto 2, has that ever really worked? I mean, Joan Mir, moved here. He already had the hype.
World champion, the 2020 world champion Joan Mir, did his 1 year move work?
Well, he also did write himself off pretty much. I think it was a testing crash at Brno. So it's Maverick Vinales as well, and took a bit of time. Actually, did he win in his first season with Suzuki?
No,
Maverick at Silverstone, second. Okay. It just seems sometimes like a bit of a hurried process. I mean, why? I don't understand why you want to jump out straight away unless you've done like a Raul Fernandez and prove that you've clearly adapted to the class and you've mastered it to an extent, even if you are missing, say, aspects of your racecraft. So I'm not sure.
Well, yes, because it worked out so well for Raul Fernandez so far.
Well, there you go. I mean, everything Alonso's done so far seems to have been very strategically planned and well thought out. So I can't imagine he's rushing to MotoGP already, but then who knows?
Yeah, and if you've got your paddock pass,
thanks very much for your time, and thanks very much.
Kick off
no worries, thanks
for you at this early point.
Okay. I was thinking about him the other day because was it Massimo Rivola who said that he was expecting Raul Fernandez to explode? And then I had to think of the SpaceX, what was it, rapid unscheduled disassembly, which I'm not quite sure is the same thing as what Massimo meant.
You were just thinking of a combustion engine, wasn't it? There was all sorts coming along about that. Speaking of engines, of course, we're backed by Renthal. Guys, if you have a street bike and you need to find a new accessory or you want to find an upgrade for your motorcycle, your street bike, then head to renthal.com and you can use the Fit My Bike option as well to find exactly what you need for your exact specific motorcycle. So don't miss out on that. We're also going to have some great competitions in 2025. We've aligned with Pole Position Travel. More on them in coming shows, but we'll be able to give away not only paddock passes, but also some hotel accommodation just to try and round off what should be a pretty unforgettable trip to a Grand Prix of your choice, or one that we get passes for. We'll outline the competitions as we know more about them this year. But big thanks to Renthal and also Pole Position for wanting to back the podcast. And before we get on to Lin Jarvis, Dave, very quickly, the next big kind of launch coming up is KTM. They've had an update on their current situation. It seems pretty good. I mean, people want to invest funds into KTM AG as a company, but we're still a little bit in the dark as to what the future holds for the racing program and the full extent of it. And that's something we might not even know until later in the year.
Yeah, no, exactly. We won't really find out what's going to happen with KTM Racing until probably sort of, April, May, that sort of thing, when there's some real clarity on investors coming in and what they're doing. They had their first, KTM had the first hearing in front of the insolvency court, and the insolvency court said, no, it all looks fine, you can carry on ahead. They do have a lot of debt, 2.4 billion over the three companies. Now they are in the process of negotiating with all their creditors about accepting the 30% haircut. They have new investors, Bajaj, CF Motor. I think they had 23 new investors, but there were the three big ones are Bajaj, the Indian motorcycle or automotive company, CF Motor, who we know, and Fountain Invest, who are a Hong Kong investment fund. They're looking to get the money, and that money would be enough to carry the business on. The business looks viable. That was the other thing that really came forward was the business is viable going ahead without the debt. The problem is this mountain of debt. They have reduced their inventory of unsold bikes, which was a massive thing. They've reduced it by 40,000. They've still got, 180, 190,000 unsold motorcycles, which is a lot. So, and their sales to consumers were relatively flat, which is reasonable considering. If you look at the rest of the market, the rest of the market, I think BMW were down by about 6%. I think Honda, Kawasaki were up. So it all sort of it varies per manufacturer. So it's not as if it's a terrible market or a strong market. KTM are doing pretty much what the rest of the market was doing.
We're not only going to hear from the riders, but also the team managers, Zaki Ayo and Nico Yon for Tech 3 and also Red Bull KTM Factory Racing at this launch. And Pit Byra is also on the schedule, so I'm sure he's going to be fielding plenty of inquiries about what exactly is going to happen in the coming months. And he can say as much as he can say, but you would imagine it has to be a little bit more information than the end of 2024.
Yeah, 100%.
Neil, just before we move on to sort of the feature interview of this week's podcast, Lin Jarvis, I mean, was he a man you sort of had any run-ins with? You had some interviews with? What was kind of your opinion on the way that he marshaled the whole kind of Yamaha project in MotoGP? Because there were obviously years of fantastic success, but also some pretty alarming low points at moments.
Yep. As you're about to hear, I mean, Lin talks about a couple of those processes in Dave's excellent interview. I'm not sure if I had run-ins, a couple of interviews, and definitely a straight shooter was always good value, always had a very interesting take on things, and always had a way of looking at things which maybe didn't immediately occur to you. I seem to remember one time when he was explaining why Yamaha were not going to give Paul Espargaro a full factory bike. This is maybe around 2016, maybe 2015, 2016. And the kind of the common perception amongst the gentlemen and gentlewomen of the media center was that Yamaha were out of their minds to do this. And Lin came out and basically just completely put it to the floor and said, "Have you seen the stats?" and kind of backed it up very convincingly with quite cohesive arguments. And yeah, there was a couple of moments like that where you saw just how skilled Lin was at putting his position forward. I mean, obviously, recent times for Yamaha haven't been great, but Lin oversaw probably Yamaha's most successful period, certainly in the modern era. He had MotoGP Riders' Championships, which speaks for itself. Obviously, the legendary period when Valentino Rossi, Jorge Lorenzo were almost guaranteed to win the championship at the start of the year, the real golden age for the factory. And even though there have been real difficult moments in the past 3 or 4 or 5 years, he has also left with Yamaha in a pretty promising position, you would have to say. Yes, they were in a real dark spot in 2023, 2024, but there are real shoots of recovery. And being able to leave Yamaha with a really strong factory team again, with a promising structure in Moto 2, and with still managing to keep hold of one of the grid's best riders in the MotoGP class in Fabio Quartararo, I think it's a pretty good way to buy out. So he was always an interesting character to speak to, and you just have to take your hats off to the career that he had. In Lin Jarvis's words, chapeau.
Dave, where did the interview take place? I mean, how was it kind of set up? I mean, usually on the Paddock Pass podcast, when we interview riders or team members or people from the paddock, we have a set amount of time. But you had quite a generous window with Lin. I mean, he was able to go quite in depth on quite a few topics.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really appreciate the amount of time that Lin gave me. I was originally scheduled to go and visit them in Milan after Misano won last year in September. That couldn't happen because there was a lot of Japanese people. They were right in the middle of this whole reorganization process. So we ended up doing the interview at, I think, on the Thursday or the Friday of Misano 2. Where I went, it was quite funny. I think I was scheduled, I was given 15 or 20 minutes or something on the schedule. And I came in, sat down, and was setting up and chatting to Lin, because I've always had quite a good relationship with Lin. Lin has always been very sort of kind and generous to me. And he's also been quite honest, because I felt like he gave me the trust, like I'd earned his trust a little bit. But as I went into the room, he got a big metal bar out. Obviously, that was slightly disconcerting, which he then put up against the door to lock us in, to stop them, to stop people from interrupting us. So I got a whole hour. That he said it's a special bar for very important meetings where he can't be disturbed. So
that explains the bruising on your face.
None of it was ever visible.
Yeah. It's the reason why you've been wearing a large fleece and a boof for the last 3 to 4 months. Okay, there we go. Well, that's it, guys. Then we'll lead in with the interview, and then also we'll play out, and we'll be back next week. Otherwise, check out our Patreon channel. Steve's been busy with Gordo doing World Superbike tests and getting lots of content there. So don't forget to check out our other channel. And then next week, we'll be back once again with another MotoGP related Paddock Pass podcast.
So we thought it was time to find out a little bit more about you, just in time for you to leave. First of all, why motorcycles? How did you end up being involved in motorbikes?
My father's fault. So, no, my father was always into two-wheeled sport, bicycles and then motorcycles, and he was an amateur trials rider. And so he basically got me riding trials, or let's say introduced me, gave me the opportunity to ride trials when I was young. So I started really on a trials bike when I was probably 15, I guess, something like that. Prior to that, I've been bashing around an orchard on a Bantam with mates and stuff like that. So that's where
BSA Bantam was the first motorbike I rode as
well.
First
one I ever rode as well, in my mate's orchard.
Yeah.
So, it was nice.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at that point, did you think this is what I want to be involved in the rest of my life, or was it just sort of, something you loved doing?
No, I had no idea, really. I mean, I was at school at that time, obviously 15 years old. I went to school in Britain. I was born in London, and my folks moved out of London when I was 6 years old. So then I moved from London down to Kent. And obviously, if you're down there in the countryside, you have more chance to do trials riding and the like. So, so I rode trials while I was at school. And then when I finished school, I had the opportunity to go to university or do something else, and I was not a huge fan of study, so I chose to do something else. And actually then my father takes the responsibility for the second time, because while I had no idea what I wanted to do, funnily enough, he found an advertisement in Motorcycle News for a job in a Yamaha distributor. And it was probably 1 centimeter of small print in the classified ads in the back. And he said, "What about this?" So I said, "Well, no idea. Anyway, let's try and see what happens." And I applied for the job and got the job, and that was with Mitsui Yamaha. Back in the day, it was owned by Mitsui Machinery Sales, the Japanese corporation, and they had a partnership with Yamaha. And I got this job doing a warranty claims, parts, basically unpackaging. Warranty claims assessor, I was called, and that was the beginning of a long story.
Yeah. Was it growing from there, or did you go to end up going to university? Was it just sort of a progressing through the company, or what?
No. Like I said, I was actually quite good at school, but I was really not interested in studying as such. If I did it again now, I'd probably do it differently. Not because I think it would lead to a different result in the end, but I think that those university years, if you have the opportunity to go, I think it can be really interesting life experience. But I chose working, and then I basically started in that pretty mundane role, I would say, and then I worked up in the warranty department. Then I did training. Actually, believe it or not, a lot of people here would probably laugh, but I actually did. I'm a qualified motorcycle mechanic.
Very good.
Then I did kind of a service engineer's job, traveling around to dealers, fixing problems they couldn't fix, which still astonishes me today that I could do that. And then I got involved in racing at a certain moment after being on the technical side. Then I moved to an opportunity that was available then in the Mitsui Yamaha racing team, and at those days, the distributor level, they were involved in a lot of things. So, for instance, that was even in the days where Barry Sheem was an Akai Yamaha rider. I was based in Chesington, so I had some sort of contact with road racing at that time, but mainly motocross. Yeah. And I was obviously more of an off-road rider, and I was responsible for the motocross activities and sales of competition bikes, and so that was my first experience. And I travelled a lot in the UK, so I stayed there for about 6 years until I was 24, more or less. Travelled all around the UK, went everywhere, and then I felt, been here, done this, I need to go abroad. And Margaret Thatcher was a great stimulus for me to go abroad, because I was not at all a supporter of that particular political situation at that time, and I decided, you know what, I've had it with the UK, so I want to go and work in Europe. So then I quit the job, which was at that time was a big step. So my parents thought I was mad, of course, to quit a job when everything was going well. And I bought a car with the steering wheel on the wrong side, put all my worldly possessions and headed off to Europe with the intention to do something. Didn't work out eventually, but I mean, it was an important step to make.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you learn so much by going off and doing things and failing.
Exactly, and I think that was really essential, because my ambition was to work in Europe. And when I left the Yamaha UK, I was called actually by the headquarters, because I'd already had some contact with the headquarters because we were working for a distributor. So it was, normal contact. And they said, well, you never know. We know why you're leaving and everything else. Anyway, you never know in the future. Keep in touch. So after I took my terrible Opel car with the steering wheel on the wrong side, and I took it down through Belgium, Germany, Switzerland, Italy. And I'll always remember when I got to Italy, I went down as far as Rome, and I went to park outside the Vatican. And I thought, oh, car will be right here, protected. Lo and behold, I came back to my car a few hours later, and they'd smashed the windows and everything was stolen. So that was a bit of a low point. But I didn't give up. I kept moving, went to France, and then eventually, after about 4 months, I returned to the UK. I thought, right, now what? And so then, after regrouping a little bit in the UK, I made the phone call. Made the phone call to Yamaha Amsterdam, as it was based in Amstelveen then in the Netherlands. A little bit like same story with the first job. I made the phone call. They said, well, why don't you come over for an interview? Went over the interview and they gave me a job. So I moved to the Netherlands. And then kind of almost a perfect scenario, because I wanted to work in Europe, and now I was working suddenly for the European headquarters of Yamaha. So
yeah, and that was again just moving through the departments, being always involved in racing?
Yeah, that was also a little bit funny, because when I went there, I was hired by the racing division, but because of the organisation of the company, my first job was actually bicycles. Yeah. So I was hired by the head of racing, and in his group, one of his responsibilities was bicycles. And my first project was to close down the bicycle business, which is a bit bizarre. So that bicycle business was done by Motorbekan.
Yeah.
It then became MBK. So I started there. Anyway, then closed that business, which was a BMX. We were making BMX bikes.
Yep. Yeah, I remember.
Stopped that, but I was already in the racing division. So then I moved on to manage the sales of racing machines, so YZ bikes, motocross bikes, TZ bikes. So at that time, still TZ 125, 250, 350 were selling well. So I was kind of in the right division again, and obviously with my racing experience, they then gave me motocross racing as a responsibility. So in 86, I'll always remember, 86 was my first World Championship victory, I would say. I wasn't riding the bike, but I was responsible for the project, and that was Jacques Vimont, the Pink Panther, and he won the World Motocross title in 86. And then I stayed involved in racing for a long time. Then they gave me marketing communications, then they gave me corporate communications, so powered two-wheeler product introductions. So I traveled a lot, and then eventually I was responsible then also for Superbike, Motocross, Dakar, and all sorts of other things. So that was like chapter 2, and then chapter 3 is this chapter.
Yeah, exactly. How did the move to Grand Prix racing? Because when you moved to Grand Prix, obviously Wayne Rainey decided he didn't want to continue. Yamaha decided we're going to run our own factory team. Yeah. Is that more or less what happened?
Pretty much. Yeah, it was honestly, I still think it's a weird story even to this day. Of course, I was the person in the company that had most connection with the road racing project because I was responsible for brand communication and two-wheel communication. So I used to visit Grand Prix, and I used to visit what we always called the Marlborough Hostility Unit, because at that stage, of course, I wasn't an insider. I was very much an outsider. I was this smart ass from marketing division that showed up now and then. So I used to have connections, and we used to do some things together. And actually, that's where I got to know Wayne at that time, because he was obviously a star at that time. He was the world champion prior to being injured, and so I knew quite a lot of people and was responsible for the other racing. And this is the weird bit. Then in '98, I got seriously sick, so I suffered from a major burnout, and I got chronic fatigue syndrome. Mm-hmm. So at that time, I had to take multiple months off of work, and I really got that burnout from myself, from my own stupidity, I think, because I was doing so many things, so many activities, so much traveling, and at the same time, I was running half marathons. Then we had kids, and I was just spinning plates from dawn till dusk. And I'll always remember my wife. I used to run to the office, for instance, on Sundays. To run to the office to get my training in on a Sunday, then work in the office for 6 hours on a Sunday, and then run back home again. And my wife said, "You're mad. You can't keep doing this." I said, "No, we'll be fine, no problem." Yeah, but she was right, and I got really bad burnout, and so I was off work for maybe 4 months at least, and in that process of being really, really sick, I understood that spinning plates was the issue and was the problem. So once I'd started to work again in the office, then this opportunity came along because they wanted to run a factory team. Yep. It was based in Amsterdam. The team, Wayne Rainey's workshop was in Amsterdam. We had to take over everything. And they said, would you like to do it? So I said, well, why not? And it was really funny, and I always smile at this because they said to me, anyway, it should be easy, it's no problem. You just need to keep in contact with the sponsors, keep the sponsors happy. So I thought, this sounds like a nice jolly. Yeah. So, but then they offered me this role. I said, well, if I'm going to do it, I want to be the boss, I want to, if it's going to be this new adventure, it's important that I'm the boss. And we started the company, which was Yamaha Motor Racing, in a little office inside the headquarters of Amsterdam, and we were in the beginning, I think we were three of us, and then the team workshop was down the road. We took on most of the people from the team, and we started with Biaggi and Checker with the Marlboro Yamaha team. So that was kind of the beginning of the third chapter, and just to come back on the what I mentioned earlier, because I think it's kind of interesting as well, is this burnout that I had. It wasn't over. I kept it for 7 years. Yeah. So in the whole time of the third chapter, I was traveling the world with a huge suitcase full of medicines and experimental drugs. And now you've seen, I think everybody knows, Casey Stoner has a similar problem now. And there are other people that have that issue, but fortunately, after 7 years, I managed to escape it. So
yeah, is it because people in racing put so much pressure on themselves? And I mean, like, part of the attraction of racing is to do better, is to do everything better than everyone else, and that is an incredibly stressful.
Yeah, I think that could be. I think everybody's story is a different story, of course, and everybody has their own issue. In my case, I think it came from perfectionism.
Yeah.
And I don't know Casey so well. We know each other a little bit, but my feeling is Casey's a little bit the same. He's very much a perfectionist, and he puts a lot of expectation on himself. And I think that's typical trait that can bring you into problems.
Yeah.
And so yeah, but then as I said, that was the beginning of the third chapter, and the third chapter has until this day lasted 26 years.
Yeah. What were Max Biaggi and Carlos Checa like to work with? Were they any more difficult than the other riders you've worked with?
In two words, I would say good and bad. Working with Max was probably the biggest education that I could have had into this world, because Max, also a perfectionist, very demanding, very difficult to work with.
Yeah.
And so I could say I survived Max, and in that process I learned so much that anything after Max was I wouldn't say easy to deal with, manageable, because he was very, very intense, and so we achieved some pretty good results. I mean, we came second in the World Championship, third in the World Championship, but we didn't finally achieve that goal of becoming champion. So at the time, working with Max was really, really hard. Afterwards, I could say I'm grateful to him, because in a way, he prepared me for everything that was to come afterwards. Let me say, I said the good and bad. That's the bad part.
Yeah.
Carlos, on the other side, is completely the opposite character. Carlos was a dream to work with.
Yeah.
Didn't achieve the same level of results as Max. I was super happy when he finally got a Superbike World Championship several years later. But nicest guy you could ever meet. Still a very good friend today. And so it was really an interesting mix of characters. And we stayed together as a team for 4 years through that Marlboro Yamaha program.
First came the switch from 500s to 4-strokes, and then came the switch from. Was it still Max Biaggi who left and Valentino came?
No, we had some interim period. So Max and Carlos were with us for 4 years.
Yeah.
So that means from 99 through the end of, what would it be, 2002.
Yeah.
Then we had 2003, when we had a mix of Barros and Melandri and Olivier Jacques and Carlos, I think.
Yeah.
And that was a difficult year.
Yeah.
So we'd come close in previous years, especially in the 500s we came close.
Yeah.
Then when we switched to 4-stroke, Honda were all dominant. And, I think nobody was a match for Honda at that stage. We missed a championship that we should have won with in 2000, when I think Kenny Jr. took the championship, and that was really our miss to not be able to achieve. And then as it continued, anyway, we got into 2003, and it was the worst year that we'd had thus far. And obviously we weren't achieving our objectives because we didn't win a single race in 2003. Yeah. And that's when came the critical moment of, we either have to step up or step out, basically, from top management point of view. And at that time I was working then also with Davide Brivio was on board, because when we stopped in Superbike, we kept Davide and we kept the workshop in Italy. Yeah. And there's a bit of a story to that as well. So then at a later stage, when they stopped the Superbike, then we took Davide as a team manager. Yeah. And then Davide had very good contacts with the Italians and with Valentino's entourage and Valentino. And that was when we started this discussion. And then our director at that time, Mr. Kajikawa, made a big ballsy move because he decided to step up, and then we had to pay a pretty big fee, pretty big premium to get the rider on board. And the fact that Valentino could step away from Honda, the all-winning dominant Honda,
and that bike was amazing.
Absolutely, and then he took the decision to come to Yamaha. That was a brand at that moment that were struggling and not winning any races, and so it's still a remarkable story. And but of course, then 24 changed everything.
I suppose the story with Valentino. Did you have to sort of tempt Valentino, or was Valentino open to offers? Was he already looking, sort of thing, or was it a bit in between? And also, because we talk a lot about Furusawa-san, how much of a role did Furusawa play in turning the project around?
Yeah, it's I think the fundamental window of opportunity was that Valentino wasn't happy with Honda. Yeah. So he was winning, but he wasn't happy. Honda were accustomed to winning, and a little bit Honda style is to believe a lot in the hardware, and kind of like any rider should be able to ride the bike and be good and be strong because our hardware is so good. And I think that Valentino, for whatever reason, I never went into the details, but he was not happy with the human interaction with Honda. Yeah. So that gave the win of opportunity. And Valentino had a bit of a soft spot for Yamaha. I think he'd always liked the brand. Then Davide had very good connections with his entourage. Then we were negotiating with Jibbo, which was his famous manager back then. And basically, Furusawa was on board, and Furusawa was willing to also. He was given the mission to turn the project around. Yeah. So the combination of Furusawa, Davide, myself for all of the negotiations, Valentino's dissatisfaction, then we were able to persuade him that we really had a desire to come back. We really wanted to win again. And we welcomed him with open arms, and then of course it all started. Really, Honda even prevented us tested in at the end of 2003, and then we started really in February in 2004 in Sepang test, and that's where we first tried this new cross-plane engine.
Yeah, exactly. Did you, before that first race at Welcome, did you think that Valentino could win?
Well, his riding ability, I think at that time, one of the key things I remember in 2003, where we made the final decision to go, was basically our conclusion was quite simple. It doesn't really matter what bike we develop. If we don't have that guy's ass on our seat, we're not going to win.
Yeah.
So he was that, in my opinion, at that stage, he was very much above everybody else. And so it was a must item, really. If you want to win, you need him on board. Yeah. So I think that we never had any doubt in his ability and his capacity to win. The question is whether we could deliver and how quickly we could deliver. And I think Furusawa, in that sense, was a very important driving force because he changed the mentality of the racing division at that time. Yeah. He was very instrumental in introducing the cross-plane engine, which I always remember again in the first test. Valentino rode the different combinations that we had, and basically he chose the slowest engine. Yeah. But he chose it because he said, that engine, it may be slow, but that engine has the characteristics that we need. Yeah. Obviously comparing it against the Honda, and a great decision. And then Furusawa's energy and all of the other engineers working together produced a good bike. But if you'd have told me that, starting in January that you can win the first race in Welcome, we'd have said, ciao, not a chance. But he did it. It was amazing. And of course he did it then also beating his arch rival Biaggi, who by that time was on a Honda.
Yeah, yes, exactly. It was what they say about revenge, a dish best served cold, and it was served absolutely ice cold. It was and one of the most memorable races, I think, in the certainly in the past sort of 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah, even to this day, even after
Yeah.
26 years, frankly, it's the only race ever where I had my heart pumping like hell.
Yeah.
You know, like this massive excitement. And so there's been some great races since, you know, many great races. But that was the one. It's really like, is this possible? Is this going to happen? Are we going to win this race? And then when we won it, of course, everybody went berserk.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was great.
And that kicked off a long period of just incredible success for Yamaha. I mean, it's amazing how pivotal that switch from 2003 to 2004. Obviously, Valentino winning a lot, and then getting Jorge Lorenzo on board, which I think was also a little bit of a mission.
Yeah, I mean, that came about in a kind of weird way because at that time, of course, Valentino won for us in 2004, then he won in 2005, and we thought he was going to go to F1.
Yeah.
Because he had very strong connections with Ferrari at that time, and obviously having won already so much in MotoGP, being a young superstar, with ambitions in the future. So he had a very close connection. He did tests even for Ferrari. He was very, very fast. So we thought, now we got the golden boy.
And he's about to leave.
And he's about to leave. So we thought, right, then we need to begin on a succession plan. So that's why we started with the negotiations with Lorenzo. And actually, they did start in 2006. And in fact, I think even we signed him in 2006.
I think my memory is that there was he was at Laguna Seca in 2006 when it was in 250s and there weren't 250s there, and that was when everything sort of kicked off.
Yeah, 2006. I remember because we signed him. I signed him at that time in my room in Laguna Seca, which was down on Canary Wharf. Yeah. And I'll always remember that because I had a very nice room, and Jorge was just like this kid that hadn't even won a 250 yet, but clearly was a bit of a killer, and so we took him on board, and you know, frankly, it was a great decision because then he won the 250, then he won it again, then he joined us. I think he even got pole position more or less in one of his first races. But of course, at the same time, then Valentino decided not to go to Formula One. Yes. So then we'd taken the successor while still having the star, which created some management issues.
Was that more difficult to manage than Biaggi and Checo, or was that just, I mean, because I also remember that we had the wall in 2008, I think, with
Michelin Bridgestone.
The Michelin Bridgestone story. That I mean, there seemed to be sort of friction, but also friction in a positive way because they really drove each other to greater heights. Yeah,
no, I think it was a very, 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 very different story to manage. The first one was fundamentally there was never really any conflict between Max and Carlos because one was clearly more performant than the other. Max was already 4 times world champion in 250s before he came. So that was really Max dealing with his demanding needs and requirements. This is one story, but without the conflict with teammate. Yeah. With Jorge and Vale was a totally different dynamic because, of course, Valentino has always recognized the potential threat and skills of the other riders, teammate or non-teammate. And so that was much more of a handful to deal with because, of course, he was our star. He was the one we needed to protect. But at the same time, when Lorenzo arrived and clearly was on his own mission. And, so then we had this, when he arrived in 2008, I think he finished 3rd in that year, then 9 he finished 2nd, and 10 he won the championship. Yeah. So clearly the decision of taking the successor was clearly correct. The problem was he became the successor while the current star was still on board.
Well, before the king had abdicated.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, it was a very successful time for us. I think in 8, 9, and 10 we won the Triple Crown, and in 8, 9, and 10 we won 3 riders' titles with 8 and 9 with Vale and 10 with Jorge, and then of course Valentino in 2010 decided to leave and go to Ducati.
Did you? How did that? How do you manage that? Because obviously, Valentino left in 2010, then came back. Later on, Jorge Lorenzo, end of 2016, decided to leave, go to Ducati. Do you persuade them to stay, or is there a point where you recognise this is just not going to work? There's nothing we can do.
It's a difficult question. Persuading people to stay is difficult if they've made up their mind or ready to go. And if somebody's made up their mind to go, it's probably better that they go. Yeah. You can put more money on the table to try to keep them there, but it's not really addressing the core issue. In the case of Valentino's issue, it was not about money. It was the fact that he did not wish to coexist with Lorenzo in the same team. So that was it. And so that was his request to us. And we said that's not possible. Yeah. That was in the year 2010. Yeah. So if you then in that year request Yamaha to effectively offload the other rider that is about to become the champion, and that was in the year when Valentino injured himself. So his season was in difficulty in Mugello. He injured himself. So when that condition became something that we couldn't accommodate, then it was his decision to leave. And as much as we regretted it, that was his decision, and we had to accept it. For me personally, it was a big handful to deal with because I live in Italy. I lived in Italy then, and I live in Italy now. So to part with Valentino for a team based in Italy, for a manager living in Italy, while he was the Italian hero number one, you can imagine the backlash that came from that. And to take a Spaniard instead of the Italian, or to choose, let's say, to choose to keep the Spaniard. Anyway, it was a very, very, very difficult moment.
Lots of dirty looks at the supermarket?
More than that. So it was a handful, to be honest. And of course, it could have gone on to be great success because he could have then joined the Italian brand and showed us what a big mistake it was for him to leave. I would say, from my perspective, from Yamaha's perspective, fortunately, it didn't work out. So Jorge went on to win in 10, and then he won again in 12.
And Valentino came back in 13.
Correct.
Obviously he understood that this wasn't a project that he was going to have any success with, and he wanted success again. Was it easy to manage his return? Because now you've got a reigning champion who knows exactly what it's like to have that person as a teammate. Or was it easier to persuade to tell Jorge, by the way, Valentino's coming back?
You do ask some difficult questions, David.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, but that's my job, isn't it?
It was difficult to accept Valentino back because, anyway, he decided to leave Yamaha. Therefore, it's always difficult to accept somebody back. Difficult also for Jorge to accept that he would return into the fold. Yeah. But honestly speaking, maybe because I'm coming from a marketing background primarily, so from a brand perspective, to have the opportunity after Valentino, the hero that won 4 championships with you, who then left and failed on a Ducati, and then desires to rejoin from a brand perspective, that's enormous, that's huge. So we took the decision on that perspective that despite a lot of internal questions and issues and problems to be overcome, we said we need to do this. And so we decided to go ahead. That was really weird anyway. I mean, to negotiate with Valentino and his entourage to get him to join in the beginning was really weird, trust me. But to then renegotiate with him to come back was also really weird.
And the power dynamics must have shifted as well, because before you're saying please come, and the other way it's also like, look, we'd really love to have you back, and look, our bike, isn't it lovely? You know exactly how it rides. And all
it was very, very, very different, but definitely the right decision to take him back. I think it was at that stage possibly a bit of a lifesaver to Valentino's career, because after being multiple champion, going out and having 2 pretty dreadful years with Ducati, he wanted to come back in the sport. I think probably if Yamaha hadn't have offered him that opportunity, maybe he would have turned to car racing at that time. But he got the opportunity to come back. We did welcome him with open arms. He came back into a familiar circumstance. We managed in a different dynamic his return. And then I think maybe in the second year he won his first race back on Yamaha, which was in Assen.
Yes, it was, yeah.
And so it was great. It was a great homecoming.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to spend too much time in 2015, because I know it's a difficult subject for everybody involved in Yamaha and Honda, really. But that year, 2015 was, looking back objectively, it was just a fantastic championship. It was there were so many great races. Valentino winning at Assen, the weird race here at Misano when it rained and Bradley Smith stayed out and got a podium. It just seemed like everything happened that year. But also you had your 2 top riders fighting for a championship again, and it felt like a much fiercer fight than the first time around, 2008, 2009, 2010 even. Was 2015 more difficult to manage than 2008, 9, 10 than the first time around?
Absolutely. 2015 was a really intense year, and maybe I'll start with the end. We were first and second in the championship.
Yep.
We therefore also won the constructors and the team. Yep. So we won the Triple Crown. Super difficult to celebrate.
Yeah.
Because we won it finally at the end of the day. It was decided in Valencia. One was on the podium and the other one was not. But as a team and as a constructor, we were first and second. Yeah. Should be the ultimate celebration in a way. And it was a disaster, frankly, because of all of the friction that was involved beyond that. And, before that, not beyond it. And it was just, was difficult to manage and difficult to digest afterwards as well, and really difficult to celebrate. And, we all know the story. We know what happened in particular from Sepang. And that's really where the big problems suddenly were created there. Because if Sepang had been a normal race, they would have been on a fair fight in the last race. Whoever wins gets the championship probably. But it didn't turn out like that. One started at the front and one started at the back.
Yes, exactly. Valentino had a good race to come through to finish 4th, I think. But it wasn't enough. But it was... it did, because I remember... the aftermath of that race, and there was just a really weird vibe about the whole thing. It didn't feel like a celebration at all. 2016, I suppose it starts with more friction, really, because of the aftermath of 2015. At the end of 2016, Jorge leaves to go to Ducati. Was that a similar story to Valentino, or was that Jorge just thinking, I don't want to do this?
Yeah, I think 15 really exposed a lot of raw emotions and feelings amongst the riders.
Yeah.
And I think 16 was a handful to coexist.
Yeah.
And so I think Jorge decided it's time for him to depart and him to leave and go elsewhere. And Ducati made him an exceptional offer.
Yeah.
I know, because I know what I was paying him at that time, or we were paying him. So they must have paid him at least the same, if not more, and they made him a very, very big offer, and he went to the Reds this time.
Yeah, exactly. Slightly more successful because by that time the Ducati was a much better bike than the bike that Valentino went to. You brought in Maverick Vinales, who had success. You've brought in Fabio Quartararo, who's been a fantastic and clearly a success. When you look back at the history of riders that you have, it's an astonishing lineup. I mean, basically between you and Repsol Honda, you've had the greatest riders sort of in the history. How do you spot all that talent? How do you know these are the guys?
Well, it's not really rocket science, honestly, because in our case, when we started the factory team in '99, Biaggi was 4 times 250 champion, and he'd ridden the previous year the Kanemoto Honda NSR 500, and he was ready to change. So that was a kind of a no-brainer. Carlos Checa was there, and I think before us he was with Fortuna Honda, I think, and he got an injury and so forth. So Marlborough's backing. We took the 2 prime riders and we took them on board, and we were 4 years together. 2003 indeed was the difficult year, but then 2004, if you want to win, you take Valentino Rossi. Again, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to work that out.
But Lorenzo was a gamble because he was clearly good, but you never know how that's going to translate. Fabio was a huge gamble. I mean, obviously it was a gamble taken by Petronas.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. So sometimes it's obvious.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to get lucky.
Yeah.
Or sometimes maybe it's also genius from some people, and I would say maybe Casey Stoner is a good example of somebody that was clearly a super talent. He was spotted. I think he was raised in the initial years by Alberto Puig. Yeah. And then Ducati got lucky, frankly. Ducati got lucky because we didn't sign him. We were very close, but we didn't. So they got the right guy at the right moment, super talent. Maybe right now, of course, Marquez is a story in itself. Yeah. He made great progress up through the ranks, and then Honda took him on board in the King's class. Now at this moment, maybe Acosta is the latest guy that seems to be really exceptional. So in our case, because we're not running Moto3 and Moto2, I think if you're running Moto3 and Moto2, then you need to spot them even younger.
Yes.
But in our case, we can pretty much observe what's going on in Moto3 and Moto2 and then try to pick up the best guys coming through. At the moment, we're not in the situation to do that because we're a little bit struggling, of course, with competitiveness. So, as you know, next year we've chosen experienced riders instead of rookies. But that's primarily just because we would have liked to have chosen a rookie, but it's not the right moment. So at this moment we need to rebuild ourselves and our competitiveness. So there's a lot of experts in the paddock here, and I'm not an expert in that sense. So I'm somebody that's better at, shall we say, making things happen. That's my function, but relying upon the experts.
You know who to listen to.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah, that's really important.
2 more things. One is, are there any riders that you wish that you had signed? I mean, like you said, you missed out on Casey Stoner, and that went on to be an enormous success for Ducati. Is there anyone that you saw and thought, I wish we'd had them?
Well, one of the funny stories that perhaps it's known by people is Nicky Hayden. You know the story of Nicky Hayden?
Yeah.
So actually we signed Nicky Hayden. So we signed Nicky Hayden to race in the Yamaha factory team. I don't even remember the year, a long time ago. So done deal. So it was great. I spent my entire summer holiday negotiating with his management in America to get him signed. We signed him, all good. So he was going to join, I guess at that time, probably it was Valentino at that time, I suppose. Or maybe, no, it would have been before Valentino's time.
2 or 3.
Yeah, it would have been before Valentino's time. So I was happy, done deal, and I thought, this guy's somebody that has the potential to be world champion. Yeah. Sure enough, he became world champion eventually. Unfortunately, because Valentino lost it in 2008 in Valencia when he fell on the camel bike. But that's kind of a pity that we could never really realise that thing with Nicky. And the reason why we signed him and he couldn't join is there was a clause in his Honda contract, and his management had not paid attention well enough. We had done all of our due diligence, but we can't get the contract. So if somebody signs a contract with you, they have to have the legal, shall we say, freedom to sign. But he signed with us, and finally they pulled him back. So I wish that I wish that had come off, because had that come off, maybe Nicky could have been champion with us, and maybe many other things would have been different. Then Casey was an interesting one, because we were that close to doing it, and he finally became champion as well. So there's a couple of guys that we were like, we either had signed and never joined, or almost signed. But no, I'm happy with the way things have gone throughout the years, and in my term, to have won 8 rider titles and a bundle of constructor and team, it's not bad.
How do you feel you're leaving Yamaha? Because the last few years have been difficult. There's been a lack of results. But to me, I've been talking to people and watching, and we see it today with Fabio. Fabio's had a really good day. He's had a really good weekend. It really feels, I know how hard Yamaha have been working in the background to turn this around, and I think you've told me before, it's a process of, this has been going on for maybe 2 years or so. Sure. Do you leave Yamaha optimistic that that your things are going in the right direction?
I let me say this. I'm very, I would say, both grateful and fortunate that I will leave at the end of this year. Because, if my age was different and I would have left at the end of last year, that would have been a very sad way for me to conclude my term. But fortunately, we'd already started the turnaround process last year. We already contracted Marini way back in order to improve that. Then we started to recruit and to look around and take people, and so I'm really happy that I could have the opportunity to not complete, because we're only just arriving at a new starting line, but I'm happy that by the end of this year we will have arrived at a new starting line for Yamaha MotoGP, because anyway, we've renewed firstly with Fabio, secondly with Alex, thirdly, quite miraculously, we managed to get Pramac as an independent second factory team, which is, if you'd have told me that 12 months ago, even honestly, if you'd have told me that 6 months ago, I'd have said, yeah, right, you're kidding. But that became a reality. Now we've signed also, obviously, Oliveira, we've signed Miller. So, and also the Moto2 project is clear with them as well. So, frankly, my goal this year, my target is to try to complete the planning process, to put all the pieces in place, and then my successor and all of the successors, because the next generation will come, they can run with it and they can do a great job and they can change whatever they want to do. But if I'm able to achieve this by the end of this year, it's much more personal satisfaction than had I left at the end of last year, when we would have been down in the dumps and in the, without really all of those key elements being in place. And of course, as you know, we're in the middle of developing the V4. That process didn't start this year, so that started last year. So I've been really fortunate, I would say, to be a part of the rebuilding process, and by the time I leave, I think the foundations will be in place.
Are you going to miss it?
Yeah, I mean, without doubt. I don't want to say I'm not going to miss it, because for sure I will. If you spent 26 of your life here, for sure you will miss it. There are many things I won't miss, and one of those is the incredible toll of traveling.
Yes.
I'm away from home, and my absence from home is probably less than a lot of the team guys, because I have the benefit of being able to arrive a little bit late. But I'm probably 150 nights a year away from home. So when you've done that for 26 years, okay, now it's 150. Probably back in the day it was 110 or something. Anyway, if you count it all up, there are many, 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 many years that you're away from home and on the road. Traveling, there's no pleasure in traveling. If somebody tells me that they enjoy traveling, I don't believe them. Arriving in new places, discovering new things, meeting new people and different people and experiencing things, this is nice. Yeah. But the process of traveling is just dramatic these days.
That's why motorbikes exist.
Exactly. So if I'm going to travel in the future, trust me, it will definitely not be on long-haul airplanes. I will travel by car, probably in Italy, on motorcycle, which I love to do on and off-road. So no, I will definitely not miss the travel side of it. I will surely miss the thrill. I'm very much goal-driven, so I'm, as I mentioned earlier, I think I'm somebody that I make things happen. I'm a facilitator, so if I have something in my mind, then I will really go after it. And I think that having that, shall we say, need or drive or demand, maybe from the company's demand or the need to do better. So I will probably miss that buzz. I will miss the buzz, and I'll miss the people in the paddock. But I'll have the benefit of being able to stay in touch, because I'll continue for 1 year as a senior advisor from the company. So I hope the purpose of that is for the company to make a smooth transition to my successors, to not lose all that knowledge. Yeah. But I don't want to be an incumbent to stop progress. You know?
Yeah.
So I really want that all the new management will take over the command, the direction, and basically I will be the guy in the background. If they want to understand something or they want to share an idea, then hopefully I'll be there for them. But I won't go to so many races, maybe 5 or 6.
Yeah, which sounds much more pleasant.
Yeah.
Finally, is there anything that you would have done different over the years? Or is it wrong to look back?
I'm not. I mean, we've talked about the past, so it's a kind of bit funny thing to say that I don't like to look back, because anyway, our discussion is all about the last 26 years. But those people that know me will say that I'm always looking forward. I'm always looking to the future. I don't like to look back. You can't change anything by looking back. Of course, you can learn things along the way, and you can certainly remember things and maybe not make the same mistake again, etc. But there's no need, there's no benefit to have regrets. I think, like I said, I really am comfortable with what I've been able to achieve personally. I think I've been a good asset for the company and the brand. So it's fine. It's fine like that. And I've many other things to do in the future. And you mentioned just now motorcycling. I love off-road riding, and I intend with my mates and buddies, because so many times they say, oh, you want to do this, or you want to do that. I say, I can't. I've got a Grand Prix. It's impossible. I'll be. But in the future, I hope I'll have more time while I'm still fit enough to ride and to keep a better balance in life.
So the place to look for you next year will be somewhere in the forests in north or the woods or hills of northern Italy.
Yeah, it could be anywhere. It could be Moab, it could be Spain, it could be Italy, could be hospital. So depends what happens. No, but I'm honestly, I'm really ready for this transition. I'm curious as well, because it will be different for me. But I think that the new people that we have in place, firstly, the team we have now is great. Yeah. Totally capable. We're on a mission. The new management, I have every confidence, and I think it'll be fine.
Okay. Lin Jarvis, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.